Hello and welcome to lesson 4 of our Jungle Book case study. We're looking at cultural industries, so continuing today with the background context to the case study, and we'll be looking at some further media theory. To start, I'd like you to do some retrieval practice, please, based on the last few sessions. So now's a good time to pause the video and to decide whether each of these statements is true or false. Okay, let's whiz through the answers. So number 1, Curran and Seaton argue that media industries are driven by creativity and diversity. Well done if you knew that this statement was false. In fact, it's number 2 that is true. Curran and Seaton argue that media industries are driven by profit and power. Number 3, Disney is not a conglomerate. Again, this is a false statement. Disney is a conglomerate. It is a large corporation that owns multiple smaller companies known as subsidiaries. Number 4, horizontal integration means owning companies at each stage of the film chain. This is also false. It's really a question designed to test your knowledge of the difference between horizontal and vertical integration. Horizontal integration means you own multiple companies at the same stage of the film chain. Number 5, a concentration of ownership means that fewer organisations control increasing shares of the mass media. This statement was true. So today's lesson focus is about the commercial context of the film industry. We're aiming to again build on our knowledge of media theory, and we're interested today in Hesmondhalgh. Hesmondhalgh's theory is about what he calls the cultural industries, so those industries that are involved in the production of culture, so film, television, as well as radio production, for example. But you might also see this theory referred to as that of profit and risk, and these are indeed two key terms to help you remember Hesmondhalgh's theory. This is my weekly reminder that there are some useful resources on Show My Homework to help, so that's the glossary and the knowledge organiser, and make sure that you have those available to access for your wider reading and consolidation. Okay, so last lesson we talked about Curran and Seaton's theory, a way that we can look at different aspects of the media. I've talked about it as a lens through which we can explore ideas about media industry. Curran and Seaton argue that media industries are dominated by those large conglomerates such as Disney, who they say are primarily driven by profit and an increasing desire for power and dominance over their industry. We looked at Curran and Seaton's theory and considered ideas about the concentration of ownership in the film industry that's particularly dominated by big conglomerates or large Hollywood studios that we referred to as the Big Five. A good way of looking at this then is to start to think about some stats and some facts and figures. And if we just look at Disney's market share of the box office, so the films released in cinemas, from the year 2000 up to 2019, we can see that they are, over time, increasing the dominance that they have within the film industry. So that by 2019, Disney can be seen to own over 33% of the market share of box office films in North America. And in fact, if we then factor in their acquisition of 21st Century Fox, their market share increases up to 38% for the year 2019. And we'll be interested then in looking at media industry and the film industry in this way, and looking at, well, if Disney has this huge market share, what other things might be governing their film production and decision making. So Hesmondhalgh wants us to think about the cultural industry, such as film, as being viewed within a commercial context. This means that he sees them as primarily driven by profit, that they are a business and they must be seen to generate profit. And Hesmondhalgh says that many of the decisions that companies will make will be guided by commerce and the desire to make money rather than creativity. So Hesmondhalgh goes on to argue that media industries are driven by two things that he refers to as profitability and risk. And he outlines examples of how companies will try to maximise their profits at the same time as minimising their risks. One of the main ways he says that they do this is through integration, so horizontal and vertical integration as a way to ensure that large conglomerates can control all stages of the film chain. So in this way we can see it being quite nicely linked to that theory of Curran and Seaton. But Hesmondhalgh goes a step further. He also outlines some ways in which the media industries will go about trying to minimise their risk, and he looks at some key strategies that we can see are used within the film industry. So a key question here then is, why does Hesmondhalgh refer to film as a risky business? If we looked at it in a simplified way first, we can say, well, there's a huge amount of money that goes into making film. So high production costs mean that this is risky. The fact that film is a competitive industry. There are lots of filmmakers, whether they are part of the Big Five or they are independent film companies, foreign film companies. It's a huge market. And also, success in the film industry is particularly difficult. It can be difficult to judge whether or not critics and audiences will like a film, whether it will generate profit or not, and it will go on to have success or longevity. So let's start with that for a moment. Why is film a risky business? Well, film, we can say, is a high stakes industry. There's a lot of money invested in it. In fact, many films lose money rather than generate profit. So that means that their production costs can often be higher than their box office takings. The distribution of profits and money taken at the box office isn't even across the film industry. We'll see that the big conglomerates and the big production companies such as Disney, Paramount, they will often dominate, and therefore they will receive a higher proportion of the profit than some of the smaller companies. And this creates what we might refer to as a winner-takes-all scenario. Everybody's looking to make that big movie that's going to be the most successful. It's going to be the big winner that year. This doesn't mean, though, that Disney is exempt from the risks involved in filmmaking. And we can look at two examples here to show where actually they have lost out at the box office. So if we look at John Carter, released in 2012, and The Lone Ranger in 2013, we've got two films with huge production budgets, in fact in the millions of dollars, who both made a loss overall, costing a huge amount of money then to Disney. Now, if we look at John Carter first of all, well, John Carter features a star cast, it has an Oscar-winning director, It's a sci-fi movie, so there's lots of things here that may have led Disney to believe that this would be a safe and less risky film to produce. In fact, it loses $122 million overall. And it's after this that Disney looks at acquiring and taking over Lucasfilm and focuses really its attention on sci-fi movies that are already hugely profitable and successful. And The Lone Ranger also stands out. We might be led to think, or Disney certainly led to think, that they were onto a winning formula. We've got Johnny Depp as the lead character. They know they've had huge success with him in this kind of a role through Pirates of the Caribbean. But again, it's panned by critics, it's unsuccessful with audiences, and it runs a loss of $98 million. So what this tells us is that the film industry is a really challenging one, and one where there is never really absolute security that this film will be profitable.